If you think about it, filmmaking really only gives us two senses to work with: sight and sound. And although audio is one of the biggest drivers of how a film feels, it's also one of the easiest things to overlook. We might spend hours dialing in color, framing, and lighting, but sound is what really brings everything to a deeper level. It guides emotion and makes the visuals feel alive. So in this video, we'll look at the different layers of sound in most projects: dialogue, music, and sound effects. I'll show you how I optimize each one and how I blend them together to build a mix that feels full, intentional, and balanced. Now, before we dive in, I want you to know that I am not an audio engineer. Everything in this video is my personal approach, and it's information and techniques that I've collected over the years of my creative work. Let's start off with layer 1, dialogue. Depending on the kind of project, the dialogue could be the most important sound element of your video. Like in this video right now, where I'm talking to the camera. If you can't hear me properly or the sound quality is bad, the message I'm trying to convey is going to get lost. So here are a few techniques I use to get the best results for dialogue audio. The first thing I do with any audio track is adjust the volume. I prefer to have my audio recorded a bit quieter to start, rather than it being too loud and having anything clipping at any point. Once I've got a good level, I'll head over to the Fairlight page in Resolve, and if you're not editing in Resolve, you'll find most, if not all, of these things in any other editor like Final Cut or Premiere. The first thing I always add to my voice tracks is the voice isolator. In a lot of cases, your dialogue audio is going to have some kind of room tone or background noise or whatever it might be, which might dirty up the sound. And the voice isolator is a really easy way to just clean up your audio. I usually have it anywhere between 85 to 100.
Ich kann mich immer wieder an sehr schönen Dingen erfreuen und immer wenn ich die Bücher sehe oder in Händen halte. Ich kann mich immer wieder an sehr schönen Dingen erfreuen und immer wenn ich die Bücher sehe oder in Händen halte.
Next, I'll add an equalizer. Here in band 1, I'll cut the lowest frequencies, so anything below 60 Hz. And in band 6, I'll cut the highest frequencies. And these are frequencies you won't really hear, but they can be disturbing, so it's best to cut them out. Then I'll play a short section of the track and it will show me where the speaker's voice sits in the audio spectrum. I'll use the other bands to cut frequencies that are disturbing or boost the ones that sound good. To do that, I play the track, boost one band, listen for what doesn't sound right, and then reduce that frequency by about 3 to 5 dB. Now I'll add the compressor. Now I'm not going to get into details here, but you can copy these settings if you want to. A compressor evens out the voice by gently turning down the louder parts, and then the makeup gain boosts the overall level so that the quieter parts come forward, and the whole voice will just sound more balanced. Next, I'll add a limiter. It works alongside the compressor to keep the loudest peaks under control. The compressor smooths out most of the voice, and the limiter catches any peaks that still rise too high. When I lower the ceiling, the limiter clamps onto those peaks, giving us a clean and consistent output without clipping. And lastly, I'm going to add a de-esser. This is going to clean up our audio even more by getting rid of those harsh hissing S sounds. Now, instead of doing this each and every time you start a new project, you can actually save this as a preset. That way you'll have a nice base to start with and you only need to tweak a few things here and there. To do this, just go to the Fairlight menu, Presets Library, and then Global Track Presets. Select the track where you just made all those adjustments and hit Save New. Then you can give it a name and save it. To apply it in the same menu, select the audio track where you want to use the preset, choose your preset, and hit Apply. Next up is music. Here I want to share how I make sure that the music in my videos doesn't get in the way of my dialogue. But we'll also look at a few techniques on how to cut down songs for shorter videos and how to smoothly get in or out of a song. But first, where do you even get the music? Well, in the first few years of my YouTube and video editing career, I was just using any music that I thought was cool, which obviously caused a lot of those earlier videos to get copyright strikes. So I switched to these free audio libraries, but honestly, that music just sounded super generic. Then in 2019, I finally pulled the trigger on Epidemic Sound, and I can honestly say that it's been one of the key factors improving the overall quality of my videos. And now, 6 years later, Epidemic are sponsoring this video, and I'm still using their music and sound effects for nearly every video I make. So when I say that they are the best soundtracking platform for every creator, I really mean that. I mean, I've been paying for their servers for 6 years, and really, they have the biggest catalog out there with over 50,000 premium tracks made by real artists and more than 200,000 sound effects. Plus, really important, if you are making money with your videos, the music is restriction-free, so no more copyright claims. Alright, now rather than babbling on about how great Epidemic sound is, let me show you how I use them for adding music to my videos. Depending on the project I'm working on, I would search for specific genres, and there are a ton of options here, so you can get very specific in your search. But I also really like searching by mood if I've got a very specific atmosphere I'm going for. And you can add multiple moods to really dial it down. Let's say I'm going for a happy, but I still want the music to be kind of calm and peaceful. I can add another mood filter right here. But there's actually another experimental feature that's just been added called Assistant. Here I can just tell the AI what music I'm looking for. For example, background music for a documentary about space travel. Then it gives me quite a few options, and they're all organized by mood. Maybe I want something dreamy, or maybe I want something more dark. And this just doesn't save you time when you're looking for music, but it can also help inspire you if you don't really know what music to go for. So you can obviously search for music on the Epidemic website, but they've also got plugins for Premiere, After Effects, and DaVinci Resolve. And all of the music and sound effects you hear in this video and a lot of my other work are from Epidemic Sound. So if you like what you hear and you want to get unlimited access to their entire catalog, click the link in the video description and use the code STAN to get a 50% discount on your annual subscription. Thanks again to Epidemic Sound for sponsoring this video. Alright, so once I've got a music track, what I used to do is throw that onto my timeline, lower the volume, and pretty much be done with it. And that was fine, but never really great, so here's a much better way to do it. In the Fairlight tab, I'll go to my mixer track that has all of my music. In this case, that's track number 3. Then under Restoration and Fairlight Effects, I'll add an effect called de-esser. And this is typically used for taming S sounds like we've seen in the dialogue section, but you can also use this effect to create a gap in the mid frequencies of the music, because this mid-range is exactly where voices and dialogue naturally live. This makes sure that each part of the sound, your dialogue and the music, has their own space, and your dialogue instantly becomes more present, resulting in a much cleaner and fuller mix. Now, another issue you might run into with shorter videos, let's say a 40-second YouTube short, is when your music track is much longer. Maybe it's 2 or 3 minutes long. So how do you make that music fit the length of your video? If you just randomly cut the song at the end, it'll sound really jarring and unprofessional. You can of course do the classic fade out, but let's be honest, that's just kind of lame. A good option is to use something like the AI music editor in DaVinci. Just select the music track, hit adjust, and let DaVinci analyze the track. Then tick the live trim box right here, and you can now manually set the length of the music track. DaVinci will cut the track and make sure it flows naturally and has a good ending. And this will do a pretty good job most of the time, but sometimes you need more control to make sure the music fits your visuals. And here are 2 techniques you can use. The first technique will work well if the song you're using has a good ending, like this one. You can then cut the ending of the song and move it so that it lines up with the end of your video. And now it's all about matching up the beat or rhythm of these 2 tracks. So just listen to the last part of the music and figure out where a good natural ending could come. You can also look at the waveform to see where the beats are. So here's the beat of the song and here's the beat of the ending. And I want to line up those 2. Then I'll add a small fade out right here. Now, if your song doesn't have a good ending or maybe you don't like it, this second technique is another great way to create a clean exit out of a song. All you need to do is cut the track right before the next beat. Make another cut at the beginning of that final beat, drag that down 1 track, create a compound clip, extend the original track to where you can see that final beat again, and put a small fade out on there. Next, open the compound clip in Timeline. Then duplicate that beat and drag it further down the timeline. Then make sure you disable it. This is basically just going to extend your compound clip. Then back in the original timeline, go to Effects, Audio Effects, and look for Reverb. Drag that onto the compound clip. I usually go for the Cathedral preset and then adjust the high frequency reverb tone all the way to 1. and the high gain reverb tone all the way to -14 or so. But different presets or settings can work for different use cases. And this is what it sounds like without the reverb, and this is with the reverb. Now that you know how to end a song, let's have a look at a super easy method to lead into a song. This one, for example, doesn't have a very natural intro. It just kind of goes straight into the first beat. So let's cut that first beat, duplicate it, and drag it to the beginning of the song. Now reverse it, and it becomes a super smooth riser to slide into that first beat. You can also try using the end of the song or the final beat. Put that at the start, reverse it, and see what you end up with. And this will work especially well if you're transitioning from one song to another, or if you're jumping back into music after a quiet section of your video. The next layer to the sound design cake is going to bring your projects to the next level, and that is sound effects. First off, you've got ambience or environmental sounds. This is the background noise that will help transport your viewer to the environment of the scene. It will make your visuals feel a lot more alive, but you do need to be careful not to make this sound too overpowering. It should live in the background. This could be city noises, an aircon running, wind, water, or birds. Then we have two different categories of sound effects. The first one being diegetic sound effects. These are the sounds that come from within the world of the visuals, and they're audible to the characters. Things like footsteps, a door closing, or the crackling of a fire. The second category are non-diegetic sound effects. These are added more as a creative choice and can add a lot of emotion to the visuals. This can be anything from whooshes to risers or impacts. One of the fastest ways to upgrade your sound design is to stop thinking of sound effects as single files and start thinking of them as frequency layers. If your sound design feels thin, empty, or amateur, it's usually not the actual sound effect that's the problem, but more so that you're only using one sound instead of a stack. Let's take a riser as an example. A bright, high-pitched riser works well for light transitions or a subtle buildup. Swap that for a low rumbling riser and it suddenly feels more dramatic, but perhaps still not fully alive. That's because a single file can only cover one part of the audio spectrum. And the real magic happens when you layer multiple risers, each occupying a different frequency range. So we've got that high-pitched riser to add brightness to our effect. Then I'll add a mid-range one to give it a bit more body. And finally, a deeper sub-heavy layer for weight. With this, you get a build that feels full and intentionally crafted, something no single riser can really pull off. Another trick that actually fits perfectly here is generating your own custom sound effects. So instead of endlessly searching for the perfect riser or whoosh or hit, you can actually build it yourself. Just grab one that's close to what you're looking for and then modify it so it's perfect for what you need. Let me show you a few ways you can do this. The easiest one is using pitch shifting, and I use this all the time. So let's say you like this whoosh, but you want it to sound a bit deeper. Right here in the pitch section, just drop these semitones to something like -10 and you'll get a more bassy whoosh. When you move the semitones up, it's gonna sound a lot higher. And you can also use this trick to create those layers like we saw before. So here I've got the same whoosh 3 times. One has a lower pitch for my low range, one is as it was for my mid range, and one is higher for my high range. And now let's compare the original to a custom-made layered version. You can also customize your sound effects by using the equalizer. Here I've got a hit sound effect from Epidemic Sound that already sounds great. But if I adjust a few frequencies in the equalizer right here, so increase the low end and then decrease the high end, I can end up with something very different that can match my visuals much better. A crucial step in sound design is making sure that the sound feels like it actually exists in the environment. And you can do that by using reverb. If you, for example, hear music playing in a big church, it would sound something like this. Whereas if that same music is playing in a small room, it will sound more like this. But you can also use reverb to push sounds further into the background. Right now the dog is really close, but if I turn up the reverb, it sounds much further away. You can also use the equalizer to make your sound effects fit better in your environment. In the equalizer, you can cut out certain frequencies to create either a high-pass filter, which cuts out the low frequencies of the audio, or a low-pass filter, which cuts out all of the high frequencies. You can then use this to make it sound like the sound is coming from a certain speaker, like the radio in this car, for example. But you can also put sounds in a different room, or even underwater. The final step in the audio process is mixing. Here you want to make sure that nothing is too loud or too quiet. Now I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but you basically want to check that your audio levels are not going into the reds right here in your master volume. Because if your audio is clipping, it's not going to sound any good after exporting your project. If the levels are too high, just lower the master volume right here. Another tip if you are using DaVinci Resolve is in the Deliver page. Under Audio and Audio Normalization, you can choose from a bunch of different audio loudness standards. Using these will prevent additional audio compression from platforms such as YouTube. And before you actually publish your project anywhere, it's always a good idea to listen to it through different speakers or headphones to make sure everything sounds the way you intended it. Now, sound design can sometimes feel overwhelming, and it's perhaps not the most interesting topic in filmmaking. But most of the time, it's actually just about paying attention to what is happening in your visuals and deciding how you want the audience to feel. Like with most things, it's best not to overcomplicate things. You can already create something really impactful with just a few intentional layers of sound. Anyway, I hope this video gave you some clarity and maybe even a little inspiration for your next creative project. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!